Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the YouTube audiobook series for The Snake and the Rose, written by Abby Matthias. I am Darius, and today we are on to the big chapter, chapter 26. If you missed chapter 25, I highly suggest going back, and if you are all caught up and ready to go, we will continue on with chapter 26, Date Night.
As time was creeping closer to the 26th of September, I couldn't help but find myself getting apprehensive about the supposed date that I was going on according to Darius. But Damien didn't say it was a date. So was that just a misconception, or was my protector demon right? Regardless of the answer, though, my thoughts of messing up my friendship wouldn't leave my head. Damien was an amazing guy and was my best friend. He was the person that knew when I needed a shoulder to lean on and was always there for me no matter what. I would hate to have this dinner date go wrong to where it makes things awkward between us. I heard a lot of stories about friends dating each other and then get friend-zoned. Their friendships have never been the same after that, and I don't want that to happen with Damien and I. However, Darius was so confident in the bond that he wouldn't let me walk away from it. My heart really wants to let go and trust his decision, but my mind kept telling me to be cautious. So when the day finally arrived, I was a nervous wreck. I was jittery about everything evolving around the dinner and the club session. From what kind of clothes I wore to knowing how to dance, I was a nervous wreck. I didn't want to look foolish or embarrass him. So I panicked about everything. I kept talking to Darius and consulted with him about the night. Yet every time I would bring something up, he always repeated the same line.
You are just overthinking it. Let things take its course, and I promise everything will be fine.
Eventually, to tame my emotions, I started doing that breathing technique that my demon taught me in order to calm myself down. Once I found myself to be tranquil again, I picked out my emerald green flowy shirt with a pair of black formal pants and flats to look formal and feel comfortable at the same time. I wasn't the kind of girl to wear a dress because of my stomach weight. I had a hard time with dresses growing up and eventually stopped wearing them willingly. But besides the point, I presented myself to Darius to ensure my outfit was presentable. He gave me a nod with positive comments while taking a perfume bottle and spraying the mist upon my shirt. Once he approved everything, he said one final thing before we left the room.
Just remember that I will be with you the entire time. I won't be hovering or intruding on your night, but I will be around if you get scared or need help. Just have fun and don't think too much about it. I'm here for you whenever you need me.
After that, I heard Damien pull into the driveway, and it was finally date time. I hopped into the front seat of Damien's car and was greeted with a warm welcome while my demon sat in the back. Of course, he phased through the roof because of his size, but he slouched so that he could hear everything being said at first.
You look astonishing, Abby. You really do.
I gave a quick smile and closed my eyes briefly, trying not to blush. But trying to act more normal, I appeared back at him to see that he wore my favorite velvet red button-up long-sleeve shirt with black pants. The shirt itself showed off his muscles a bit within the arms, but not too much though. It was just enough to grasp the concept of him being somewhat built. As I finished with my quick glance, I replied back to him. Well, you look very handsome, just like you always do, my kind sir. And we both laughed a little at my response as he started driving us to our destination. As the ride prolonged, Damien talked about work as he was moving up in the world of mechanics. he got a pay raise and was promoted to being a moderate mechanic instead of a beginner. Once he was done talking about that, though, I spoke about how I was still working on my dad's farm milking the cows, but was in school once more for the interactive media design program. After that, he asked me if Natasha was in my classes again, and I blabbered about her ignorance and entitlement for the rest of the car ride. For as we made it to the restaurant, I realized that I took up a lot of the time talking about school and started apologizing for it. I didn't want to make tonight about school or have it be filled with me complaining. However, Damien just kept telling me that he loved when I talked to him about it.
It's a good way to vent and let your problems drift away instead of bottling them. But if you don't want to talk about it anymore, we don't have to. Whatever you want to do is okay with me,
he said gently. After that nice remark, he quickly got out of the car to open the passenger door and placed his palm out to me. I grabbed it in kindness and exited the vehicle, and grew extremely shocked by the gesture. Yet my astonishment didn't fade away as he kept holding my hand to lead us into the restaurant. Upon entering the Nightingale, I immediately saw a line of about 4 couples waiting and figured we were going to be the 5th ones wanting to dine in as well. But despite the line, Damien kept leading me to the side as we started walking past some of them. As I became nervous and looked to the left of me, I seen those people start to gaze at us in disappointment and anger as if we were cutting the line. So I nervously turned myself to Damien to whisper, "Why are we skipping these good people? Shouldn't we wait behind them?"
I made us a reservation. The Nightingale's policy is if you have a reservation, you are allowed to head to the main desk to be seated immediately.
When he told me that, I felt my heart fall a bit. He made a reservation for us at the busiest restaurant in town to assure we would have a spot. He never went to these lengths before if we had private outings together. Hell, just going to this establishment alone was out of the ordinary. With all this in mind, I was now stuck believing in Darius's theory that this was a date. Once that thought started to settle in, I started growing nervous again. While my thoughts and feelings were stirring, we reached the counter and Damien interacted with the host.
"Hello, Anthony,"
he greeted, reading the worker's name tag.
"I have a reservation for 2 under the name Damien Haynes."
Upon the mentioning of his name, the host typed on his keyboard and confirmed the reserved spot.
"Okay, Mr. Haynes, I see you do have a 6 o'clock dinner reservation and we can seat you immediately. You and your mistress can follow me."
And he grabbed 2 menus and led us to our table. As we walked and followed the employee to our sitting arrangement, I started to lose the sight of Darius within my peripherals and turned my head back to find him. He was standing in place as distance was being created, and I must have expressed a scared expression. For a couple seconds later, I heard him within my head.
"I'm giving you 2 some privacy like I promised. I don't need to listen on your conversations. I'll be sitting at an empty table near the side wall and leave you be. Have fun, and if you need me, just call me in the head."
I nodded in confirmation and took a deep breath to focus back on what was happening. As we made it to the table, Damien stood behind my pulled-out chair and gestured for me to sit while he pushed it in. He was being extremely polite and fancy, which I've never seen before. I mean, I got that this was a nicer place and that dressing formal was more suitable than casual clothes. However, he was acting like a true gentleman. It was almost like he was trying to win me over. The only thing with that was he already did in a friend perspective. He was already so nice and polite the way he normally acted. He most certainly didn't need to go the extra mile to prove himself. But anyhow, I allowed him to continue on with his plans as we both started looking at the menu. Upon evaluation, I seen that there were a lot of fish and steak options scattered throughout the hardcover menu. All of the sections and titles used fancy names, and I ended up reading the descriptions of the meals to understand what exactly included within them. However, I settled for a chicken parmesan dish with a side of salad. I wasn't really a fish person, and I wasn't in the mood for steak. But that doesn't mean Damien wasn't. Once our waitress came over, he ordered our beverages and dinner all at the same time because we already knew what we wanted. For himself, he ordered a 20-ounce ribeye, topped with onions and mushrooms along with mashed potatoes. After the waitress wrote down our requests, she walked away to a different table while Damien started the small talk.
So, do you like the place so far?
Oh, yes, very much. It is so beautiful in here. I like the vintage feeling it gives.
I figured you would. I most certainly like it too.
He stated, chuckling a little bit.
But honestly, though, how have you been? Not Natasha or anyone else. I want to know how you've been.
I'm fine, to be quite honest. I'm just working my usual grind and just trying to make it through life. That's all anyone can do.
Absolutely.
He agreed.
All anyone can really ask for in life is happiness and safety. Money is an important aspect within the world as well. That's how people make a living. However, my perspective still stands by the famous phrase, money can't buy you happiness. It can only buy you valuables that only supply temporary bliss.
Well, look at Sir Damien coming in and speaking elegantly, I said teasingly. However, I do have to agree with your statement. After my response, Damien started rubbing the back of his neck as if he screwed up.
Yeah, I know that sounded preachy. I'm sorry. We can move on.
It's okay, Damien. You don't need to apologize. What you said is so true. I'm not striving to be rich, and look where I am. I am so happy to have the things I do. More importantly, I love having the friends and family that surround me. That's what matters. With that remark, he smiled at me appreciatively and finally started acting more like himself as we continued on with our normal conversations. As we spoke to each other, I started developing feelings I never had before. The only time I could recall the emotions was within that bubble space I went to on occasion. Yet somehow they were starting to reveal themselves within the moment. My eyes couldn't help but stare into Damien's as I continued traveling deeper into new territory. His deep ocean blue eyes were pulling me in and filling my body with peace and serenity. As for his words, some of them filled me with different kinds of sentiments that I was completely unfamiliar with. Altogether, I was confused as to what my body was feeling, but I was also thrilled at the same time. It was like a raging war was rising internally. I somewhat liked the sensations and emotions that my body was experiencing. However, I was also aware of my innocent morals trying to fight back these pleasurable emotions. At that point, I knew my brain was trying to think from my heart again, like Darius told me about. So trying to take his advice, I tried my best to keep focusing on Damien as the interaction continued. After about 15 minutes of pleasant talking, though, a random blonde skinny woman wearing a dark pink latex dress came to our table and interrupted our conversation.
Hi there,
she said with a really girlish tone towards Damien.
Hello? Can I help you?
Yes, you can. I can't help but notice you sitting here from across the way, and I wanted to tell you that you're really cute.
Oh, well, thank you.
He replied with the same uncomfortable tone. We both sat for a few seconds as she stared at him with her hazel eyes. She kept fluttering her long fake lashes, which could probably make wind if she batted her eyes enough. This woman reeked of entitlement like Natasha, and I knew what she was trying to do. She was trying desperately to make Damien fall head over heels for her by acting like an innocent floozy with an amazing sex appeal. Yet all I could think about was how she was making a fool of herself. After a few seconds of that, Damien decided to break the silence again.
Was there something else that you needed?
Oh, yes. I thought you would never ask.
She exaggerated, twirling her finger in her hair.
I was wondering if you wanted to hang out with me tonight after your dinner and have a good time. Figured you would be interested.
She said, winking her eye at him. And just from that action, I knew this wasn't going to end well.
As Abby and Damien were being led to their table, I stopped in my tracks to give them some space. I figured I could give them as much privacy as I could while still being in sight of her table. She was already worried out of her mind about this date. I wasn't going to make matters worse by hovering over the table. Another thing was that this was supposed to be the time for them to connect more on a personal level. I certainly didn't need to get involved. But anyhow, Abby noticed that I stopped following and instantly turned her head to me to see what I was doing. I waved my hand to her, motioning that I was not following, and she displayed a concerned expression as she made her way back to Damien. However, I reassured her by saying, "I'm giving you two some privacy like I promised. I don't need to listen on your conversations. I'll be sitting at an empty table near the side wall and leave you be. Have fun, and if you need me, just call me in the head." After that, she tried to lighten up a bit and focused back onto Damien. As for me, I made my way to an empty table located on the side wall like I told her, and it gave me a straight diagonal view of where they sat. It wasn't too crowded where I was, for there was only one other woman in a pink latex dress sitting by herself at the table next to mine. She looked like she was intently staring at someone or something. However, I didn't analyze her gaze. To be frank, I didn't care enough to evaluate her intentions. Regardless of what that stranger was doing, this spot allowed me to keep an eye on my human and ensure she was comfortable. Yet another thing about my spot was that I had a table all to myself. So when Abby was looking at the menu, I quickly teleported myself to my house in hell and grabbed my powers book that I had laying on my desk. It only took me a few seconds to grab, and I popped right back into place. She didn't even notice that I was gone. So upon my successful retrieving of my book, I continued reading about the fire elements to further my knowledge and try diagnosing myself. Time started ticking by, and I periodically lifted my head to take note of Abby's expression and body language. I knew she would have a twinge of awkwardness as she was hesitant to even be at the Nightingale with Damien. Yet after a bit she seemed to lighten up as the minutes flew by. Sometimes, just for fun, I would even look at the hologram from my marking to make sure she was still okay. By checking her heartbeat, it would have signaled the kind of feeling she was having. It eventually steadied from its normal fast pace, and I knew I didn't need to interfere with anything. There were also times where I gazed to the left of me as I heard that blonde lady move around in her seat, and it distracted the hell out of me. She never took her eyes off whatever she was staring at, but all I could hear was the latex of her dress rubbing on her skin and the chair. I couldn't understand how people could wear such clothing without getting pinched or rubbed raw by the material. However, there was still nothing I could do about it. Regardless, I still kept checking up on Abby occasionally and read my book. As a good chunk of time passed, I felt a sudden rush of wind fly past me, and it made me look up from my educational book. Gazing forward a bit, I seen the skinny blonde woman past me to advance herself somewhere else. I assumed she was finally moving towards whatever was catching her eye. So again, I went back to reading, disregarding her for the time being. Yet, upon looking down at my book, I realized I haven't kept tabs on Abby for a bit, so I decided to lift my head back up to check. As I did so, I instantly grew shocked to see that exact woman standing at the side of Abby's table, talking to Damien. This lady was sitting at a table by herself and just suddenly walked over to a random table to interact with complete strangers. Something fishy was going on here, and it was going to affect my human's date. From that sight, I had to know what was going on. So, using one of my protector demon techniques I learned from my book, I tapped into Abby's hearing to listen to what was being said.
Yes, you can. I can't help but notice you sitting here from across the way, and I wanted to tell you that you're really cute.
The blonde girl said with flattery.
Oh, well, thank you.
Damien replied, obviously displaying his uncomfortableness with the woman. After that response, the blonde just kind of stood at their table without speaking for a few seconds. Abby and Damien looked at each other, making confused facial remarks. But after a few seconds, Damien broke the awkwardness by asking,
Was there something else you needed?
Upon the question, the woman started to twirl her hair within her fingers and said,
Oh yes, I thought you would never ask. I was wondering if you wanted to hang out with me tonight after your dinner and have a good time. Figured you would be interested.
At that very statement, I grew furious at what was happening. Who in their right mind goes up to a random table and asks one of the people out? Especially if it looks like a date that the original two were having. As I looked at Abby's face, I could see that she was getting uncomfortable and shocked about what was happening. It also semi-looked like she was convinced the latex dress was going to steal her man away. So as I grew angry, I decided to stand up and make my way over to analyze the situation more.
This woman had the audacity to walk over to our table and ask Damien out. Then to make matters worse, she asked him right in front of me. I tried really hard to keep a blank face so that this woman couldn't read my emotions. How could she feel so entitled to just waltz up to my table and try to take him away from me? No, we are not dating, but I still felt threatened, especially because of the new feelings that lingered within my body. Was it really that obvious that we were not a couple, or was she just targeting Damien this entire time? I was worried because I knew she was hot enough to persuade him into doing so. I wasn't nearly as pretty as her, and she wore a very short latex dress. Her hair was silky and perfectly straightened, while her boobs and ass stuck out just enough to gain anybody's attention. She could flaunt her assets to any man and hypnotize them within an instant. The most important thing was that she was your typical skinny model, seemingly perfect in every physical aspect of life, with even fairer skin. It would make sense for Damien to choose her over me. So as I continued to worry, I saw my demon starting to march over with an aggressive expression upon his face. As he made it to her side, I could visually see the extreme height difference between them both. Compared to him, the blonde bitch was a midget in a twig. It was almost iconic to see them two standing near each other, but I didn't bother to laugh because of how concerned I was. Darius and I both glared at this woman as Damien replied, to her intrusive question.
I am going to decline that offer. I have a planned night ahead of me with someone else, and we would like to get back to it.
Well, how about I join you then? I'm sure your friend wouldn't mind.
At that moment, I seen the face on Darius switch to annoyed and confused. His expression became so exaggerated that it seemed like he was looking upon some sort of repulsive creation. Yet it made me want to laugh because of how ridiculous it appeared. However, I had to hold back my amusement.
I am pretty sure she would mind and is currently uncomfortable with this interaction. Even if that isn't the case, I would mind. So if you excuse us, we have a dinner to get to without you interfering with it.
What?
She whined.
How could you turn someone like me down?
Because I have been waiting for someone else to get into a relationship with. Plus, this is no way to get me to like you. You are being very rude and only cause drama based on your outfit.
At that statement, she began to appear baffled. Based on the expression she displayed, she very rarely got rejected and couldn't handle the denial. However, I couldn't help but think about his reply. Waiting for someone else? Who was it? But the bigger question popped into my head that could be answered by the end of the night. Was he waiting for me? After my brief questioning to myself, I heard Darius chime in with his thoughts.
Who the hell does this chick think she is? You don't just interrupt a date that isn't involving you. She must be some kind of airhead.
Upon the saying of his last sentence, he started tapping his index finger on the top of her head. I was surprised he even did that, yet she must have felt it because she ran her fingers through her hair to get rid of the tapping sensation. At that point, I couldn't help but chuckle a bit from the built-up laughter I was withholding within my body. I knew that wasn't right for me to do, and I was about to pay for it.
And what do you think is so funny about this?
The blonde asked, snarling at me. I stuttered for a moment, realizing I had to make up a lie, and quickly said, I'm sorry. I just find it funny how you can't take no for an answer.
Well, you don't have a chance with him either, hence the word friend.
With those words coming out of her mouth, it stung a little. I didn't understand why it wounded me, but I just brushed the words away as I knew she was just being rude.
She has way more of a chance with me than you do, as a matter of fact. I told you my answer. I said no, and I will keep denying you from here on out.
Oh, come on now. Have you seen this chubby freak?
She said, pointing at me. My eyes widened in utter shock and embarrassment. I knew I was far from being skinny. However, I was better than most. But knowing that this was a flaw that people used against me just saddened me deeply. I looked at Darius and then to Damien to see their reactions were alike. They both looked visually pissed at what she said about me. But that didn't stop her from saying anything more.
She is below your standards and doesn't even have the decency to wear a dress to a fancy restaurant. Look at how underrated she is compared to me. This is where the rich and captivating people come to dine. You are most certainly welcome. But her, not so much.
You don't know anything about me, you ungrateful wench! I blurted. She then stared at me with aggressive eyes as I continued my defense. You don't know where I come from or what I do. You don't know my story, so I would suggest you stop with the insults before you get yourself in more trouble.
Oh, I know more about you than you think. You probably work at a low-paying job like farming and can only afford cotton t-shirts.
It's none of your damn business where I work. You're not my mother or someone I care about. At least I have a bigger heart than you do, so get lost.
And what are you gonna do to me, you green whale? Flop on me with your belly rolls?
That's enough.
Damien scolded as he stood up. From his expression, he looked furious at the blonde girl and towered over her, casting a slight shadow. Darius quickly backed up out of his way and started to smile, knowing that Damien was upset. However, he maneuvered himself to stand behind my chair and grab my shoulders as he started to talk out loud.
This is what a partner will do for you if they truly love you, which he does. Just watch and dwell in this moment.
I grew confused as to what he meant by that, but I was about to find out as the girl made one last remark to Damien.
It's about time you stood up to leave. Now come over here away from this cow and...
You need to get out before I call someone over to escort you out.
He shouted. At his declaration, everyone within the entire establishment stopped what they were doing and turned to the ruckus. My face immediately reddened as I felt the warmth consuming it. I wanted to sink in my chair to disappear from the fight, but Darius grabbed the top of my head and spun it to face Damien again.
All I wanted to do tonight is have a lovely dinner with this gorgeous woman and treat her with a night almost as luxurious as her. You don't know anything about her like I do, and you have no right harassing her about her weight or characteristics.
The girl's face started turning red upon being exposed, and I began to wallow in her embarrassment.
What are you talking about? All I did was ask you out.
And I politely told you no. But you couldn't handle that, could you? You clearly saw I was with a woman who was below your standards and envied how she could be with a person like me rather than you. The most basic, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, skinny play doll who thinks they can scoop up any man they want because of their body type. You have such a toxic personality that you use your body as a way to get around and hook up with every sugar daddy that enters this place. Am I right about that?
Hell yeah! You tell her, Damien!
Darius exclaimed with excitement. At that moment, she was so taken aback that we all knew he was right. But this wasn't enough insult to injury for her. So he gave her one final rant to put the nail in the coffin.
You are a disgusting human being for everything you have done here tonight. You are a disgrace to society every time you have came into this place to prey on other gentlemen like myself. I can't even imagine how many relationships you've broken because of your selfishness. But you're sure as hell are not going to ruin this one for me. I've waited way too long to have someone like you recklessly come in and abolish it. So instead of being such a disreputable human being that you are, how about you get your offensive ass out of here and let the rest of us continue with our dinners?
Upon finishing, I couldn't help but smile at my knight in shining armor. He had on a serious face and was pointing to the door as the girl was on the brink of tears. Damien wasn't putting up with her crap and was persistent about her departure. And after a brief moment, she actually walked out, and the entire restaurant applauded him. Him and I grew so confused as to why everyone was so joyous about this interaction. We thought we were going to end up getting kicked out. However, the host came over to us and explained how she has been a problem in their business for months now. They have gotten complaints about her preying on men and harassing other guests while she was here. However, they couldn't do much about it legally until they had hard proof about these happenings. Yet because of tonight, they officially caught her red-handed and could finally kick her off the premises for life. They thanked Damien profusely, apologized for her harassment, and gave us our dinners for free. But the best part of this was after everyone went back to their meals, Damien pulled his chair next to mine to comfort me.
Hey, are you okay?
He asked gently. I felt Darius let go of my shoulders just as Damien leaned in closer to me. Yeah, I'm fine, I said, lowering my head ashamed.
Abby, you don't need to pretend that you're okay. You know you can be yourself when it comes to me. I am so sorry that you had to deal with that, and I am sorry for making a scene. I know how much you hate confrontation, and I didn't want to display that side of me.
Damien, that was the least of my problems. Thank you for standing up for me. He must have sensed my lingering insecurities. For the next moment, he took his hand and gently lifted my head up to gaze into his eyes. Upon the sight, I instantly felt the same amount of peace and serenity from when I first deeply looked into them. I was suddenly dwelling in his touch upon my face and actually ended up grabbing his hand to keep it there. He gladly did and started talking some more.
You are the most beautiful person I have ever met. I don't care about your weight or the way you dress. Everything about you is amazing, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Don't let that anorexic twig get you down with her judgment.
After that, I started to smile. It was nice to hear those compliments, especially from him. I don't know what came over me at that moment in time, but I wanted to be physically comforted by him within an embrace. So I randomly leaned myself over and clung to him. As I did that, he instinctively wrapped me in his arms and started to rub my back. I took in how I was hugging my best friend and enjoyed every bit of it. His affection was an overflowing sea that I was gracefully floating in. His sweet embrace of comfort made my breathing steady and my body feel safe. I could smell him briefly as his shirt was near my nose and the scent of fresh passion fruit filled my nostrils. This is what I wanted in my life. A man who would defend and protect me while lifting me up to be the best I can be. A person I could trust and enjoy every day with, no matter how good or bad it gets. This was the moment I realized I was falling for Damien. No, not falling. I'm in love with him. And I was now nervous and panicked about how to go about this. However, it didn't take long for Darius to intrude.
If you need to talk to me, either talk in the head or go to the bathroom.
At that remark, I knew I had to speak to him about this. I needed advice on where to go from here. I had to confront my true feelings about Damien, and he was the only one I could truly talk to at the moment. He somehow understood what I was going through, and I couldn't play this calm charade any longer. So I let go of Damien and began to speak. Hey, I have to go to the bathroom. Could you give me a moment, please? He of course nodded his head and gestured for me to get up. Once I did, I gave him a smile and walked away to break down within the restroom in front of Darius. As I walked in, I inspected the stalls to see if there were any occupants, but the bathroom was cleared out. Knowing that information, I quickly locked the door and began to vent. I have feelings for Damien.
Abby, I told you that already, silly.
Darius said with a smile. However, the smile faded away after he took in my scared expression.
But why are you freaking out?
Because I thought I didn't until that girl almost ruined the night. I never confronted the feelings before, and now they are overflowing my senses. I realize I want to be with him, but I can't help but think I'm going to screw up tonight and blow my chances.
What in the world are you talking about? You heard him out there after the Blondie incident. He likes you for who you are. He is physically and verbally showing you how much he adores you. I lied. He's showing how much he loves you. He is professing his love without putting it into words because he doesn't want to screw up either. I want you to understand that he is just as nervous as you are and doesn't want to mess this up. He has his heart set on you, and he is wrapped around your finger.
I stood there in silence for a bit, reflecting upon the facts. But I continued listening to his motivational speech as he stepped closer to me and grabbed my hands.
What you are experiencing right now is love. It is nothing to be afraid of, and this is what people search for. There truly is no other bond stronger than the one you currently feel with that young man. This is me speaking from experience. The way that man treats you is almost exactly how I treated my wife, and I have felt the same way. The only thing that can get in the way of this romance forming is your mind. Just let go and let this happen for yourself. Be happy for once.
After his touching rant, I realized that he was right. My freak out was irrational and unnecessary. My head was getting in the way of this. It was gonna be hard, but I have to let go and let my heart talk once and lead. So after a minute, I spoke, responding to him. You're right. I'll try. Thank you. He nodded in assurance and pointed at a stall, telling me to actually go to the bathroom to make sure I told a half-truth to Damien. So once I was done and washed my hands, I exited the bathroom and went back to the table to eat our dinner. The rest of our meal was full of meaningful conversations about life, nothing too out of the ordinary between us. Darius kept to himself again and sat at his individual table reading some sort of book. Eventually, I felt bad that he couldn't eat anything, so I asked if he wanted to be half and half to get some food in his system. He obliged, and we somehow smoothly formed the half and half and made the body function. Darius still kept quiet and allowed me to continue talking to Damien. Then, once we were done with our meal, Damien tipped the waitress and we left for Club Miracle. As we walked up to the dance club, we could hear the booming music from the outside as the speakers were pounding within the building. Damien yet again led me towards the front of the line as the people standing within it were cursing us out and yelling. But once we got to the bouncer, he told him who he was, and we were immediately let into the club. So as Damien held my hand, I heard the people in line continue to moan and scream while we started walking through the hanging streamers. I brought the commotion to Damien's attention, but he proceeded to tell me that one of his good friends owned the club and that he was welcome any time, even if he had a +1. He also told me he had his own little section within the club for us to sit at and have non-alcoholic beverages. Well, at least until we are 21. Then that can transfer. Feeling like the luckiest girl in the world and a little giddy, I willingly followed him to our VIP section where we met his friend. After a couple minutes of instructions and talking, the owner left us alone and we sat in our booth really close. He wrapped his arm around my shoulder and pressed me into him a bit as we sat watching the people dance. As I took in the sight, I started feeling pretty overwhelmed. I've never been to a nightclub before, and what I was witnessing was hard to take in. I saw different kinds of dance moves people were using that were very sexualized. Girls were grinding on the boys' junks and rubbing their breasts to make the males go nuts. It was ostentatious. Learned that word from Darius. And made my body feel uncomfortable. Did Damien think that he was going to get treatment like that? Was that how I was supposed to dance? I wasn't that smooth or sexual enough to perform those dance moves on anyone, especially for my best friend. If I was expected to dance like that, he might not want me. So as I started to sit in the booth nervously, Damien told me he needed to go to the bathroom quick and that we could go on the dance floor afterwards. I acknowledged his statement and allowed him to go while I waited for him to come back. As I sat, Darius abruptly unfused with me somehow and jolted me forward as he left my body. I ended up catching myself by grabbing the top of the booth, and he flung forward, stumbling onto the other side of the section. Once he oriented and straightened himself out again, he began speaking to me.
Abby, you do realize that he isn't gonna make you dance like that, right?
I was somewhat in shock as he knew I was worried, but I still responded to his question. Well, I don't know. I've never been to a club before, and I don't dance. I never had experience with it.
That doesn't matter. He won't care about it. Just be yourself and have fun. This is just his ploy to get closer to you and create some romantic tension.
After he said that, Damien walked back to the section and stood in front of me.
You ready?
He asked, holding his hand out. I swallowed hard, starting to regret what I was about to do. But I still grabbed his hand to take me to the dance floor as Darius stayed in the booth. As we found an empty spot on the lit-up ground, the song changed to a slow, soothing bassline song about a man calling his lady an angel. I was thankful for it being the opening song to our dance session. It shouldn't involve extreme dance moves, like I saw previously. But that still didn't change the fact that I was nervous. I waited for Damien to start moving so I didn't make a fool of myself. But I started out with a 2-step sway while adding some arm movements as well. Once the lyrics started up within the music, I heard Damien singing along with it. His eyes locked with mine as he kept singing, and I couldn't help but smile and blush. It felt as if he meant every word of it, and was describing his feelings towards me without truly confessing them. Yet what was even more impressive was how beautiful his voice was. I'd never heard him actually sing before, so this was an amazing treat. Upon that realization, I wanted to return the favor to him and experiment to see what would happen. Of course, I was still nervous to act upon my decision and didn't know how it would turn out. But I wouldn't know until I tried it. So after gathering my courage, I turned my body around to make Damien face my back while still swaying back and forth. Once I did so, I faced the crowd of happy-go-lucky dancers as they were swaying with their partners. I skimmed my eyes around the room and ended up turning my head enough to capture my demon watching me. His initial facial expression showed confusion clear as day. However, after a few seconds it changed into his "I told you so" expression, and the table of confusion turned onto me. Yet it was only for a few seconds, for soon after I felt Damien's presence behind me as he placed his hands onto my hips. He matched my swaying motion without missing a beat, and I felt like I was in heaven. He was practically cradling me and pressing into my body gently. This was indescribably new to me, and my mind was screaming to examine how much of a fool I was being. But yet, I ignored it for once in my life, and allowed my heart to speak like Darius told me to. My heart was loving the fact that Damien wanted to be with me and no one else. It fantasized being with him everywhere and was longing for him. It was taking in every sensation and moment as he was pressed into me. As everything continued, I felt his firm but gentle hands helping my hips sway to the beat as he kept singing near my ear. Eventually, I turned my head to look at him while we were dancing and saw how intimate he was. His pupils were extremely dilated, and he was smiling as his lips sung such soothing words. Upon that lovely sight, I remembered a previous piece of information that Darius told me about pupils.
If someone's eyes are dilated while they're talking to a person they like, that means the person has a huge amount of attraction towards the other. It's all about oxytocin and dopamine, the love hormones.
As everything started unfolding in front of my eyes, and remembering that fact, I knew it was undeniable that he liked me. Tonight was about seeing if I liked him back, and I finally understood that I did. So tonight was the night. I was going to allow myself to show it. Yet I didn't have time to at first, for the song suddenly changed to a more sexual song that Damien and I didn't know. So upon those results, we decided to go sit in the booth again. As we finally sat down on the booth once more, he tenderly grabbed my shoulder again, and I willingly leaned against him with my head resting on his shoulder. My ears were filled with the sound of music and his steady breathing as we continued to breathe in the love-filled air. I also couldn't help but notice Darius staring intently at the scene that was unfolding in front of his eyes. He appeared as if he was overwhelmed with happiness as he expressed a smile. However, I could still sense something off with him just by looking into his eyes. I just didn't know what. Yet, I knew not to ask about it right now, so I allowed him to observe the moment in silence. As Damien and I were in the middle of cuddling, I heard something buzz and he started digging into his right side pocket. Upon revealing his hand again, his lock screen shined and a text message alert appeared in plain sight. Before looking away, I saw that the title of the person texting him was Mom, and knew it wasn't any of my business. So I started to sit up as he unwrapped his arm from around me and began trying to explain himself.
I'm sorry. My mom was excited for me to go out tonight, so I'm sure she's just checking up on me and seeing how it's going.
Damien, you don't need to explain yourself. It's your mom. I'm not gonna argue with you about it or throw a fit.
I know. That's a wonderful virtue that you have. Family is just as important to you as it is for me. I just like filling her in on my life as I am kind of the only thing she has left.
He stated while replying back to her. With that information, I was jolted back a bit. I didn't know much about his family situation, but this made me want to ask. What do you mean the only thing left? Doesn't she have other family besides you?
They live outside the state and very few are left. However, I think it's more because I am her only child.
Oh. Well, that makes more sense. I'm sorry if I sounded nosy or rude. Upon my apology, he finished his text and quickly put his phone in his pants pocket again to speak.
No. You didn't do anything wrong. It's just when it comes to information about myself or my family, my mom gets very nervous. She doesn't like talking about it. Hell, she doesn't even like me talking about my family life. It's just more respecting my mom's wishes than my own at this point.
Damien, you don't need to explain. I get it. I apologize.
It's okay. Thank you for understanding.
Once that brief conversation was over, he finally stood up and said,
Let me get some beverages for us. I'm sure you must be thirsty from being in this hot room. Once we have quenched our thirst, we can go out and dance again.
I would be delighted to. I said excitingly for some reason. I liked the idea of being by him again like that. Having our bodies touch and move and sync to the music. My heart wanted it. But my mind kept interfering and reminding me that I can't dance. Yet, Damien gave me a smile and left to head to the bar area.
Well, look at you finally being lovey-dovey with Damien.
Darius intruded as I was watching him walk away. Is it really that noticeable?
Are you kidding? The fact that a month ago you were only hugging and now you are cuddling and sexually dancing with each other makes it extremely obvious.
But that really wasn't sexual dancing. I exclaimed. That was just swaying back and forth.
Well, then you're in for some night, huh?
Darius, if the dance advances more than what we have already done, I'm going to screw this up. I don't know how to dance, especially at a club. After my little outburst, we sat in silence for a couple seconds before Darius said,
Do you want to go half and half? I could actually help you then.
I sat there baffled, pondering that statement. I knew that was an option, but I didn't want to make it weird for him. If his remark about the sexual dancing was going to happen, he would also feel whatever happens. Another thing, I want this to be my moment, not his. Yet the biggest concern was he also hasn't been in a club for 13 years and isn't brought up to speed with the kind of music my generation listens to these days. So I brought up the concerns involving his solution. You haven't danced since you were alive. How could we possibly pull this off?
Do you really think I never went clubbing after that night with Nala? I went clubbing with her every month after that. I have learned a thing or two within that time period, and the moves were something I never forget. Plus, most of the songs that came on have the same rhythm and technique that I used to dance to. If you are really scared to dance with him and think you're gonna screw up, fuse with me, and I promise you, you won't regret it.
After his response, I gave in and stuck out my hand to stay. Fine. So after our verbal agreement, he maneuvered himself by me and grabbed my arm. Then, within a few seconds, we magically fused for the second time tonight. It was still a little harsh, but I still managed to minimize the body from jolting too much. Yet my body moved enough to make my hair land on my face. So as I went to lift my arm, nothing happened. I tried again to move both of my arms and legs, but ended up not being able to move anything. Only the head was available to me. This never happened before, and I couldn't understand what was happening. So freaking out in the head, I called to Darius. Darius, I can't move my body. Once I said that, my arms started moving and pulled my hair behind my ears to clear my vision and face.
Yeah, I see that now.
He replied.
Well, this kind of works out better anyway. Now I can fully control how you dance instead of only half.
Oh, fuck. I responded back. I truly didn't know how to feel about this scenario anymore. But before I could display any more of my concern, Damien came back with our drinks.
Here you go, fair lady. Non-alcoholic strawberry daiquiri.
I smiled as Darius took the drink from Damien, and he slowly maneuvered the cup to my lips so I could drink it in little sips. He was somehow able to make my body movements look natural as we relaxed for a couple more minutes. Damien was again trying to explain why he was taking so long, but I really didn't care. The point was that he came back and didn't just leave me in a setting that I am not fully comfortable with unless he was around. Regardless of that, after a couple more minutes of relaxing, Damien finished his drink and extended his hand out again to take me to the dance floor. I was going to respond a little hesitantly, but I couldn't even say anything before Darius quickly grabbed his hand and stood up. So as I was helplessly the passenger of my own body, we made our way to the dance floor again.
As I stood and took Damien's hand for Abby, I truly began to reflect upon what I was about to do. I willingly fused with my protector child to make her stop worrying about the night. Even though the fuse ended up working differently than what I was used to, It worked in my favor as I controlled the body, except for the head. But despite that, I didn't really think about myself in this picture. I was going to be able to feel everything that this boy would do to her. From hip rubs to ass smacks, if it gets to that point. The male demon was going to be touched by another male human clueless on Abby's situation. In hindsight, this was extremely weird. However, knowing that all the awkwardness for me would possibly make my human fully fall in love with the boy of her dreams by the end of tonight made me forget everything concerning myself. I can read the writing on the wall that these two are destined for each other. I was going to do everything in my power to allow this to happen. As I maneuvered her body to the dance floor holding Damien's hand, Abby started vocalizing again within the head.
How are you going to know what to do? Can you even see or hear what is happening right now?
Of course I can. I see through your eyes and hear perfectly. Can you still feel your body right now? Can you feel Damien's hand?
Surprisingly, yes. But I still can't move my body.
That doesn't matter. Don't worry about that, and focus on your experience. Embrace and examine your feelings towards him as this is happening. You'll know if he's the one based upon that. I didn't get a response after that as we finally made it to a clear spot on the dance floor. Taking a moment to listen, I noticed the energetic pop song about dancing to music with someone was playing out of the blaring speakers. It was just starting to play from the beginning, and I knew this was perfect. I've heard the song before because of Abby singing along with it as she worked and already knew the tune. My path to impress her future boyfriend was set, and my brain knew what to do. I know I am nowhere near being an expert on how to dance like a woman, but I can still recall some of the moves my wife did that could be matched to the beat of this song. It just had to be slightly modified. So we first started out by swaying back and forth facing each other. I like to call it the dance shuffle as people tend to begin with this move and evolve from there. Yet, as we kept in this sway, I could see those typical dreamy eyes that Damien was using to stare at Abby. While glaring at them for a moment, I felt that strange feeling of deja vu again. I still didn't know why this feeling kept occurring and why my memory worked against me trying to recall something. However, I had to brush away the feelings once more to focus on the more important task at hand. Continuing on into the song, Damien started to grab her hips and pull her in close to start touching. We were still keeping the sway, but I moved her arms up to rest the hands upon his shoulders. A slight but effective way to drive a man crazy. The power of touch can be used in many different ways, but if a woman uses it on a man who is lustful for her, he'll internally beg for more. I saw the smile grow on Damien's face and saw the tone of his eyes shift to desire. Yet I only saw it for a few seconds as he acted out by grabbing my hand to spin me a little. I allowed the move to swiftly happen, spun a little, and was pulled back to his body as my back was now touching his chest. His arms crossed over mine and laid upon Abby's stomach as we resorted back to the dance shuffle routine. Once that was happening again, she moved her head to view his eyes as he gazed at her with passion. To also add more emotion to the scene, I brought her hand up to brush his cheek with her fingertips. He closed his eyes for a brief moment and smiled even wider than before. I knew my actions were working, and that every move I made would help drive these two lovebirds together. Yet, Abby still had to semi-question my actions.
Darius, you're driving him nuts!
She said in the head. Well, of course I am. This is your next lesson on how you can tell he likes you. He is displaying his desire towards you. All I've done is touch him and he's blown away by you.
But technically this isn't me. You're the one controlling my body. This is already crazy.
Abby, he doesn't know that. These are all subtle actions you can take to knock him off his feet. If you think this is crazy, then you better buckle in for a ride. And I brought my arm down to start my next dance move. As we then turned around, I quickly threw the right arm up in the air while dropping the rest of her body down to the ground. Yet as I stood back up, I made sure to brush my butt on his pants while running the right hand up her leg. I'll admit, I could feel his bulge as I did that, but I again rushed the topic out of my mind to continue. To finish the entire move off, I managed to do a hair flip and spin myself around back towards Damien, so we were face to face again. Now with just his facial expression, I knew he was on edge. His eyes were wide with excitement while his lips were slightly pinched to hide his arousal. His breathing was a little rapid as well, but it quickly slowed down as he truly started taking control of the dancing portion. I have to say so myself, I was taken aback from how he was starting to lead. He actually grabbed her hip to lead her in a circle around each other. Then after a circle or two, he took the hand and spun us around again to start touching up on us. He started at the cheek and tenderly ran his hand down to her chest, and stopped when he got to her hips again. Along with that, he willingly pressed us into him as his hands stayed in place. Then, that dance shuffle happened a final time. During this time, the body was finally starting to develop feelings that I expected. Dirty feelings, if you catch my drift. But this was a good thing. It was a natural and healthy reaction towards your partner. However, something was telling me that Abby was going to ask about it in a few seconds. So I was going to wait till she asked about them to explain. Yet the questions never came. She was taken away by the moment and was hypnotized. As I took another listen to the song, it was nearing the end, and I knew I had time for one more move to hopefully excel the scene again. So I ran her hands up his stomach and chest to wrap them around his neck. After I did that, he copied and caressed her waist while placing his left hand on her cheek. However, he gave a quick smirk and dipped us down to hold us within his arms. With that exact move, I knew that was my cue to leave and let everything else take its course. As I left, it didn't affect Abby and no one noticed anything different. I saw a loyal man holding up a compassionate woman. With that sight, I knew the sexual tension was set for Damien to kiss her. They were both smiling and breathing heavily within the heat of the moment. This was it. The time where my human would find love and embrace her soulmate officially. The point where two hearts come together to form the bounding love towards each other. The same love I felt with my wife when I first met her and fell into upon the sight of her. Everything was falling into place. Everything was set perfectly. Yet it was ruined by the song abruptly changing, and they both blew it off. So upon the song shuffle, they cleared their throats and adjusted themselves so they could walk off the floor. Once they were in the private section again, they both checked the time to find it was 11 o'clock. Damien and Abby were shocked at how long they have been at the club, and they both decided that it was time to go home for the night.
This has been Chapter 26, Date Night, from the book The Snake and the Rose. Tune into the next video for Chapter 27. Thank you for listening.